Welcome to Rates and Barrels, Thursday, March 13th. Derek VanRiper, Sarris, Trevor May here with you on this episode. We have taken on the task of ranking the best rotations in baseball. It is a more challenging exercise than I expected to be going in, but we're going to have a few debates, talk about our process, get into the weeds on that a little bit. We got some spring news we're going to get to, and we're going to talk about a few things that teams might be doing and players might be doing training-wise at spring training this year that's just different, unique, or relatively new. So we'll dig into some of those things that are happening as well. A quick heads up and a reminder, we have our 2 live episodes at Bear Bottle Brewing Company just 2 weeks away, March 27th and March 28th. March 27th, of course, is opening day. 4:30 local starts at the Bear Bottle Bernal Heights location in San Francisco. Looking forward to trying the beer that Eno brewed, Kayakers Cove. Great looking label on that. I got to get the wide label on the screen. It's in Discord if you want to check that out. Of course, you can join the Discord with the link in the show description. So, tons of ground to cover. We got hard outs. We got the threat of John Fogerty looming yet again because Eno is still at spring training, this time in Maryvale. No game today, though, so much less likely to get a center field blaring through randomly in the middle of the show. We're going to take a quick spin around the league, look at a few news items. I saw Max Scherzer had an MRI on his thumb. That apparently checked out okay. He's had a very good spring so far, 14 Ks, no walks in 9 innings. It led me to a quick question for Trevor. How many MRIs happen in spring training that we don't even know about because of relatively small things that pop up? It seems like there might be MRIs we never hear anything about.
A lot. Honestly, in terms of not hearing about them, I think that, yeah, sometimes they're like, we're not going to mention unless someone asks us explicitly. But usually that's coupled with someone not playing that day that would have played. And then they kind of have to tell you. So I don't think there's a lot of secret ones, but yeah, there's a lot where they're like, let's just get one. And if nobody, we would prefer if nobody knew about it, but we're not going to keep it a secret. Yeah, but the MRI machines in Florida and Arizona are getting work. That is for sure.
Dude, there are off-season surgeries we don't know about.
Because someone asked, right?
Off-season's a little different. They're home.
Yeah,
they
because
cannot tell their team. That's happened before.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Even though they're paying with their insurance and they know about it, they have to file it. They still try to get away with it. So yeah, off-season surgeries, little cleanups and such, those are pretty common too, where they just walk into spring training. By the way, I had 2 minor procedures in December.
It doesn't. It doesn't always come up because yeah, Trevor's if they're not in the lineup, then everyone's like, oh, why is he not in the lineup today? There's questions, right? They're not in the lineup all off season, so there's no reason to ask him about it. So if the player doesn't volunteer it, then they don't have to tell the media. So there are literally, I think we probably know. My estimate is we know about. I would say we know less than half of the off-season surgeries that happen.
Less than half? Do you think that's accurate, Trevor?
I was talking to a hitting coach, and he mentioned offhand that 2 of his guys had surgeries that nobody knows about.
I would say position players, hitters. There's a lot of little hand, little ankle, little foot, little stuff that's scar tissue, or it's an abrasion, or that's actually a normal procedure that someone who is dealing with something chronic would deal with. That's the majority of it. We had some guys with patella tendonitis, they get shin splints all the time, and there's cleanups you can get for that make it a lot easier. It's little stuff like that, especially if the rehab, if you're going to spring, it's going to be exactly the same. There's no reason to tell anybody, but 50%, that wouldn't surprise me either, because as a pitcher, sometimes I'm we're in May. They're well, when I had my cleanup in January, I'm you had surgery? We don't even know. Some of the players don't know. Yeah. That's how separate we are for the most part. In terms
maybe
of
I'm a little aggressive. Maybe it's 30.
It might be a little bit, but it's closer than you think.
Yeah, I felt like it's more we know 75 to 80% of the actual injuries.
That's still a lot, though, if you think about how many players there are. Even if it was 80%, we don't the takeaway here is we don't know all of them,
right?
For sure.
True.
But we're definitely in that part of the year where random stuff pops up. You're like, oh, your thumb was bothering you and you had an MRI and it came back clean. Great. Glad everything's checking out okay. I did see Lucas Giolito is going to open the year on the IL. Fortunately, it's just for a hamstring strain that he suffered during his spring outing on Tuesday. So relatively short-term absence expected there, but I thought it was worth a follow-up just because we had talked.
Frustrating for him.
Just one little hiccup after another.
Yeah, I think that's an underrated part of like when we talk about injury risk and we talk about, things like this, we're sort of hyper focused and hyper fascinated with the elbow. And one of the ways that just older pitchers deal with stuff is these other things, backs and knees and hamstrings. I know those things hurt for me.
Kinetic chains and whatnot.
Yeah.
Some other link on the chain that you haven't had to worry about suddenly breaks, and you're like, great. Now I got to rehab this for the rest of my career. It just piles up. Ask Joe Mauer. That's what he was doing for his whole the last years of his career. He was in the training room, or not in the training room, in the weight room for like 3 hours, just going through his progression because of all the little stuff that he had to worry about. That's kind of what happened.
Buster Posey and Trevor May retired early. They just didn't want to deal with it.
True.
Put you in the same sentence with the future Hall of Famer. You like that?
Drafted same year, our bad. At the same age.
So there you go. You both left early.
Yeah. He might have. Did he inspire me? Maybe.
One other news item I wanted to bring up to you guys. Jeff McNeil likely to open the year on the IL with an oblique injury. That might actually take a little more time to heal, which is a great source of intrigue, though, because they have options.
That bothers me. I have a fair amount of shares of Jeff McNeil because he's second base and outfield eligible, and he's a great backup player in most rosters.
Well,
I think he's better than Luis Angel Acuna, but now Luis Angel Acuna will get a chance, and maybe he'll just take the job. I mean, there's a possibility there.
Yeah, you seem scared. They're going to play Brett Baty over there, it sounds like, too. He played a little bit there at AAA last season. Hasn't played there in the big leagues before. I'm kind of curious if you guys think Brett Baty can play a capable second base, because Baty versus Acuna, at least until some future date when Ronnie Mauricio is healthy, would be the best tandem that the Mets have available to fill in that spot in the short term. So who do you like to come away with the early season playing time there for the Mets? I was loud wrong about Baty last year too, man. Like I thought Baty was going to be a breakout guy.
I mean, I think he has this. I mean, I've seen a lot of Brett Baty, and I got to play with him a little bit, and his skills wise and tools wise are still there. I think it's just about execution at this point, like having it happen results wise, and it just hasn't happened yet. But I think it comes down to like righty versus lefty stick. Are we going for speed? Now we got Pete Alonso's our big righty stick. We've got a lefty in Soto. Like I think that might come down to it, whether or not they want to have what side of the plate, because they're both pretty young. I think that the nod probably goes to Baty because they want to see, like, I think it comes down to you want to know whether or not, hey, is this gonna happen? Or
right.
Should we?
Is he an asset for organization, or are we just moving on at this point? Yeah,
it might be give him another chance. If he gets it, it's give him another chance situation. If not, they've already made that decision, in my opinion, probably.
The Baty, I think, with the hard hit rates and the max EVs, like that's what you're talking about a little bit, is like the underlying tools, the skills, like they seem like they're there. He just has hit the ball on the ground. And even guys, the Rays are full of guys that have a 114 max EV and a 50% ground ball rate. They do this all the time. And for some reason, it's worked for them, but it hasn't worked for Baty yet. But you do have to point out 602 plate appearances over 3 years, so it's not really quite like a full shot at any time. I would also say we were talking about third base versus second base skill sets. I forget who it was about, but I asked you about it, Trevor, and you were talking about lateral quickness.
It was Bregman.
Bregman maybe being a little bit more important, lateral quickness a little bit more important at second, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
I would say that I can't necessarily get that off the eye test, but I would say that Baty is young. So it's not like you're taking an old third baseman and putting him at second. You're taking a younger guy. So yes, Angel Acuna would be better defensively at second, it was my guess. But Baty has the much better offensive upside, so I think he'll get the first shot.
Yeah, probably won't be a liability with the glove, and that might be enough in this case to get that at least temporary opportunity. Also saw from Mets camp, Sean Manaea has begun his throwing progression, could be back by the end of April, so some good news for that banged-up group of pitchers as they try and make their way back from the IL. Speaking of pitching, the meat of today's rundown focuses on our picks for the top 10 rotations in baseball. Usually ranking things for me is pretty easy. This was not easy. We settled on a few different things that we wanted to focus on. The current starting five, the next three starters up. So there was a depth component here. And then I think we were also talking about health grades maybe being kind of factored into this as part of our rubric as well. So what do you care about in a situation like this, Trevor? You went in and ranked all 30 rotations for a video on your YouTube channel earlier this week. That's sort of what inspired us to bring this to the conversation today. So, what matters to you as you're trying to sort this out?
When I'm trying to do, I learned my lesson last spring training about rankings and how, most of them are kind of just done on a vibes basis. How are you feeling about it? And I was like, I want to make sure I have some categories to some main things I want to look at so that I can have a reason for the rankings, and then also maybe make them a little bit more unique than everybody else's. I mean, I think that's the point when you're doing media as well. And this time around, the three I landed on was depth. How can you weather injuries, and how many injuries can you weather and have starting pitchers actually starting games? I had innings. How many innings can your starting pitching with that depth in mind handle in a year? For like the Mariners were as an A+++ in this, throwing 6 guys all year. Like that is the best you could possibly get. And so like it also takes stress off the bullpen. And then the last one was a little bit unique to me, and I was just thinking a lot about the playoffs, and I call it the playoff three, the big three. You need 3 dudes. If you have 3 studs that you can count on that aren't going to throw a clunker in a playoff series and they're all cooking, that team usually gets all the way to the end, if not wins it all. The best starting pitching. This isn't like, we're not talking about bloody sock Schilling or like, Randy Johnson. Like we're not talking about guys going out there and Bumgarnering it and throwing every inning. I'm just throwing 5 2/3.
Do you have 3 good? Run. Do you have 3 good starting pitchers? Do you have a game 3 starter that you actually want to put in there, not a bullpen?
I almost think it's like 3 starters that you trust to face the lineup a third time, or at least the heart of the lineup a third time, because that's sort of a differentiator between the guys that get you to the postseason, those 4 and 5 guys that are good, that help you eat innings and are better than other teams 4 and 5, versus the guys that stay out there longer in October.
Yeah, they're usually the piggyback, got to have a game 4, we need to piece it together type guys.
I was inspired a little bit by something Trevor said about, also there being like kind of this middle where like how precise can you actually be? Like even if you look at the Fangraphs depth charts for starting pitching, like there are places in the rankings where they're separated by half a win, where there's like 5 teams separated by half a win. So you have to pick one of those. And I think there's a little bit of false precision being like, I'm going to pick this team because I've got 0.1 more WAR projected. You know what I mean? It's like, what are you going to do? So the inspiration I took from Trevor May in this is I did a ranking of health and the top 3, like your top 3 studs and stuff. But I just did a letter grade ranking. And I thought that would take me away from some of this precision. And give me a better sense of the strengths of these teams and show you some groupings. So, in my top 5, basically, you have top 5, you have A stuff or A+ stuff, and you have A or A+, you have A's in stuff and top 3. That's how you got into my top 5. Where the Phillies became maybe a surprise number 1 for teams, for anybody looking at this. I had the Phillies number 1 because they also add this A health grade as I saw it. They have, and health is health plus depth, right? It's everything. I'm going to give the Dodgers a D because yes, they have good depth, But what we saw last year from the Dodgers was they have such an aggressive injury risk on that roster that it might actually get to the point where they don't have a top 3 in the playoffs. That's what they were like last year, where like there were so many injuries that they were still wondering who was going to start the next game. Like if they hadn't won the World Series in the game they did, they had no idea who was pitching the next day. You know what I mean? And so a D health grade for the Dodgers actually dinged them all the way down to 3rd. I had the Mariners in there because I think the Mariners can bang when it comes to stuff, can bang when it comes to the top 3, and have a better health grade and health/depth grade than the Dodgers. I even talked to Emerson Hancock about his new sweeper. I think they're fine when it comes to depth. But by doing it this way, you can actually start to see my groupings really easily. Maybe I undersold the Pirates a little bit, and I could even move the Pirates into the top 4 or top 3. But there's a little bit less, they've been tested a little bit less, and I would say that their top 3 might be behind, the Phillies, Mariners, even the Braves, just because it's Skeens and Co. Like it's not, their 3rd starter might be, if it's Mitch Keller, then they're behind these other guys. That's an A- for me in the top 3. But it's not just, it started with the Fangraphs SP depth charts, but there was some significant moving around once I did these grades.
And yet, if you look at how all of our lists sort of stack up next to each other, you'll find some of us have got teams in the top 10 that are just not in other people's top 10s. And they might never be, if we went 5 deeper, you might still have some omissions and some disagreements along the way. And Trevor and I both had the Dodgers at the top. Had the Phillies there. You only had the Dodgers down at 3, so it's not like it's that big of a difference. And I think the biggest outlier, maybe on the entire screen, as we look at all these top 10s, I think Trevor is more optimistic about the Tigers than just about anybody that I've seen or talked to so
and
far.
The Rays. Look at that. The Rays.
And the Rays, the Rays. I was talking to him before we started recording. Like usually I'm pretty high on the Rays, and I think I like what they're doing, but I think if I did the Eno method of health grades, would you give the Rays an equal health grade to the Dodgers or a lower health grade to the Dodgers? Because it's got to be close, right?
Yeah. I mean, they have their 2 Tommy John guy. They actually have a 3 Tommy John guy.
Yeah, Drew Rasmussen, man. Like I continue to be just amazed that he's back.
And that's where and it's very clear that health and like depth was my lowest kind of weighted thing here. I honestly, now I'm really looking at it. The best way to explain the way that I did rate these things is like, if of the teams that if they made the playoffs, who has the best chances with their rotation to win the World Series? Like that's really kind of what it is in my head. And it's like the Tigers are in there because they have Tarek Skubal. But I was telling Derek before we started, if Tarek Skubal got hurt, they go to like 25. So like, yeah. But he won the Cy Young, and he is literally that bona fide like we win today. Like we're gonna win. Like a game we can count on. Not is he going to cover it. We're going to win the game. And that is exciting. And I think Flaherty going back is a good quality choice. And then I think I'm getting super excited about Jackson Jobe. And also what I'm seeing out of Casey Mize. So for the question marks that were there before spring started are a little bit clearer for me. And both those guys have looked good. Like the changes they've made and the step that Jobe has taken and the changes that Mize is making, they look like they are starting to kind of they could pan out, and these guys could be weapons as opposed to like kind of being like, oh, who knows? And that just kept happening everywhere. That happened everywhere. Same with but you mentioned the Rays. It's like, who wouldn't want McClanahan, Rasmussen, Taj Bradley? But at the same time, like all 3 of those
my
guys.
My favorite guy, Pepio.
and Pepio, but like you're also like, but it's also just as likely that none of those 4 guys hit 100 innings. So like,
right.
You have to like, are you just going to assume everyone's going to stay healthy, or are you going to assume everyone's going to get hurt, or are you going to do something in the middle? And I just kind of assume everyone's going to be healthy because that's what I prefer to think because I'm a pitcher.
Yeah, right. I mean, I also think the Tigers have an element of what I was talking about with the Pirates, where it's like Skeens and Co. and it's like Skubal and Co. And I did some dreaming for the Pirates where I think Jared Jones with the sinker this year, is going to take a big step forward. And I like some of their depth pieces that may not even make the opening day roster a lot, in Bubba Chandler, and I like Thomas Harrington. So I think that they go really deep with players that could make that leap the same way you're talking about the Tigers. I think I was turned off a little bit when I looked at the Tigers at Olsen, and I'm not as big on Flaherty, and some of the guys that are in there right now, sort of looking at what they've done in the past. And I am trying to project the future, but I kind of want to see it a little bit more before I put them in there. You know what I mean? Like I fall in love with Casey Mize like 3 million different times. And so, I think that was my personal foible with, I did have the Tigers like 11 or something. So it's not like I had them way down, but that's when I was looking at the Tigers versus the Padres, for example. I was like, the Padres have guys with proven track records, and I love Dylan Cease, and I love Yu Darvish, and I love Michael King. And it's like, that's 3 guys that yes, you might lose your game 1 against the Tigers, but you'd probably, if you were evenly matched otherwise, you'd win games 2 and 3 with the other guys, and so that's why the Padres made it on, and the Tigers didn't, basically.
I think the Rangers might be a team we should discuss a little bit. Had them 8th. Trevor didn't have them in his group. I had them up there because I think when I'm looking at a rotation, I do look for that playoff ceiling. I think I might have too much confidence in Jacob deGrom's twice repaired UCL just being fine. He's a day-to-day with a stomach virus right now. So if you saw day-to-day next to his name or a red flag when you're drafting, it's not because he's hurt. It's because he's sick. He'll be fine.
Oh,
in a couple of days.
Jake, just be sick and don't tell anybody. Like, it's a funny thing with Jake. Just I also so good. I'm like, oh, you're not feeling good, Jake? We would just give him crap all the time.
I also wonder though, if you're on the Rangers beat and you see deGrom's not there on any particular day, you're probably asking some questions about it, right? Like that's just a natural reflex given how the last year's gone.
Yeah, I mean, it was a hard one to rank because not if we have this a little bit of a playoff focus, then not only is there how many innings is deGrom going to throw, but like when will he throw them and will he be available at the right time? But the reason they got on for me was I am excited about Kumar Rocker and Jack Leiter, and I think that I'm not sure that they could step into deGrom's shoes, but they could provide, like, Eovaldi's like a pretty steady number 2 type, even in a playoff situation. He's pitched big games in the playoffs. And you wouldn't get a deGrom type number 1, but Rocker or Leiter, if everything clicks in the right way, do have the ceilings of number 1 starters. And so there's definitely like this universe where deGrom is healthy in the right places. Eovaldi is steady Eddie all the way through, and one or both of those guys breaks through, and it is the best rotation in baseball. Like that's one of the outcomes for the Rangers this year.
I think they continue to be built on a wider range of outcomes because of the health grades and even because of the development, banking on the development of Rocker and or Leiter to take that much of a step. Using that Trevor, who are the 3 playoff starters method, you're kind of saying, okay, they got 2, but their 3 would be a question mark. And then you look at the lineup and say, well, they can hit their way out of that problem, out of that weakness. That's what makes this team really dangerous, right? It could be a top 5 lineup again this year because they've added to it. They've got a couple of young guys that have broken through in Langford and Carter. Top to bottom, a very complete group and actually very healthy. Not a lot of red ink when you look at that Rangers depth chart for the position player group either. So I think that's how you sort of like talk yourself into this team being maybe more complete than it actually is. But who do you like as their number 3? If you had to project it today, we get to October, deGrom and Eovaldi are healthy. They're the game 1 and game 2 starters. Who is most likely to be their 3rd best starter out of the current guys on the roster?
Is it John Gray?
Is it Gray? Could be.
I mean, that's chalk. I'm tempted to go with one of the young guys, though.
You think it's more likely that one of Rocker or Leiter is that guy for them?
Yeah.
I almost think you have
I'm not
to
sure he
believe that
passes
to rank them higher.
I think, yeah. I don't think he passes the necessarily 3 times the order stuff because of some of the shapes of his pitches, but Kumar Rocker is my answer. He could definitely go out and blow the doors off a team for like 4 innings, and they might be careful with him the 3rd time through with some lefties because of he's got that kind of sinkerish shape. But I think Kumar Rocker would be my pick for the 3rd guy. Gray is more of a guy who gets you there than a guy who you use when you're there.
Yeah, and he's like a long guy coming in when the game either gets out of hand or either way.
Or you tend to Rocker.
I would agree with that. I'm interested to see what if Leiter's able to have an effective 3rd pitch. I think that's what he's missing. I mean, he's profiling 5 now. He is.
Yeah,
he's still got 2 really good ones, and then 3 other pitches that exist. And I'll tell you one thing: if you go throw him in the 8th or 9th inning right now, he's probably pretty good. But
oh my god,
that's not what they want out of him. So, but yeah, I'd say Rocker's probably more. It's weird to say this, but he's more of the starting pitcher right now. It's weird because Malley just went down again, and Bradford had a MRI recently, so it's like there's so much injury there. It's
Dunning is pretty capable. Like
they were all
I don't really like Dunning, but Dunning's capable depth. Like that's a pretty high end like 6 starter type.
He's definitely in the good enough to help you through the regular season, and then a guy that you're not using nearly as much in October.
Yeah.
With all due respect to Dane Dunning, feels kind of mean to talk about a player that way, but it's usage. It's just what rosters are kind of designed to do, right? The roster gets a little tighter once you get to that part of the calendar. I thought it was interesting that the Diamondbacks popped really on all of our lists. They were 7th for Eno, 3rd.
We put
for
the
Trevor.
Red Sox in the same place, all of us. It's so weird.
It's the only thing I think we agreed on in terms of placement was the Red Sox are 6th, a little lower than where they come out by WAR. But the D-backs, I think they were one of those teams that would have been on the fringe last year before adding.
Put up the rankings again. Where do we have the D-backs?
It's crazy. Look at this, man. Like you got them 6th, 7th. You have them 7th. Trevor's got them 3rd. I have them 5th. So
that's fairly good agreement, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, on aggregate, they're a top 5 rotation. How much of that was the addition of Burns? Just like thinking about how much.
Trevor, you have no Pirates.
Yeah. Okay. So I got to be very clear. Tied in at 11th was like the Braves, the Pirates, the Padres.
Oh, you don't have the Braves either.
But that's
Explain
the thing.
Yourself.
Like,
why no Braves?
You get to Schwellenbach, and then who's the other 2? So it's like I like those 3 guys, and also having played against Reynaldo Lopez quite a bit, he threw really well last year. Had an amazing year. I don't think he's going to repeat that same year. I think he's going to be good. But and then DVR was talking, and I were talking about this too. Strider changes everything. Like Strider, whenever he comes back, then I'm like, take your 4 spot. Like you're just going to slide right down. Honestly, on my list, the Yankees I got to kick out of there. I think completely. I want to swap them with the Padres because they're just in a better position at the moment. But like Braves they're all like right there. Like, hey, what about us? Because I'm like, I mean, you have the reigning Cy Young winner. You got to be in the list. But it just kind of it's thin. So I kept getting hit with this like I like the 3, but it's a thin list after that. Or just like a lot of question marks. There's options, but the guys that they're gonna try out there haven't had a ton of big league success yet and have had cups of coffee. And that's why mine's not in there. But I have go to the Diamondbacks. I mean, Corbin Burns, Gallen, and Merrill Kelly have been like maybe the most just consistent 3 dudes.
Solid.
Like they're up there with the Phillies in the consistency of the top 3, in my opinion. Like if I want stoic dudes just going out there and doing what they do, the Diamondbacks versus Phillies, like that would be the least expressions on pitchers' faces that you've ever seen in a series. And then I like that. Who knows? Jordan Montgomery just needs to get any semblance of old form at all and be the 5 guy. Like, it
is kind of interesting to have
options.
Jordan Montgomery, Eduardo Rodriguez, and Ryan Nelson, none of who, like, I think anybody on the show might be like, oh, that's a great pitcher. That's going to be amazing. But like to have those 3 as your kind of 4 through 6.
Yeah. Eduardo Rodriguez, when he pitches, he is the same dude every time you like. I'm just talking about inconsistency wise. They have so many consistent options that if they are cooking, doing well, and like their version of themselves, every single day they could have a dude who's super hyper consistent that they can know what to expect.
Yeah,
I love that. I think that's really important.
I think they're low-key closer to the Phillies than I would have expected before going into this exercise because of their depth. The big difference for me between the two and why I've got the Phillies ahead of the Diamondbacks is that next guy up that they're going to lean on at some point, Andrew Painter. That's better than anything the Diamondbacks have in that depth group, even though their depth groups are both very good. I mean, you could see Painter as the Phillies' third best starter behind Wheeler and Nola. That would not be surprising once he's up and in that rotation. And a lot of teams just don't have a guy that's that good. A lot of teams that are that good don't have another guy to add to the mix, right? So I think that's one thing about the Phillies that almost gets a little underrated is it's not just the guys that are there right now. It's that they have that special talent coming off of Tommy John surgery that should be there for half or 2/3 of the season.
I have a nomination for Team Oatmeal.
Team Oatmeal.
Rotation Oatmeal.
Yeah.
Let's throw it up again. I think you'll see it. My 10. Trevor doesn't have them. And DVR doesn't. DVR has them 9. That's 9. Team Oatmeal right there. The Twins. There's not. I can see why maybe Trevor didn't put them in there because if you do the top 3 thing, they aren't really there. Their top 3, their top 3 can bang, but they're not going to bang against Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola.
It's always been that way. I just want to be very clear. It's always been that way. It's never been anything other than that. Maybe they had Yohan Santana for a bit, but and Liriano, but that's how they put together their starting rotations.
But they got pretty good depth. I really like Zebby Matthews. I've liked David Festa. So they have the next guy up is great. They have some Lodum guys. Like Simeon Woods Richardson throws 90 poo, but he has a really wide arsenal. He's kind of interesting. If Joe Ryan is healthy, he can be an ace that won't be an ace with maybe a capital A. If you're like a small ace group, then he won't be your ace. But if you're like there are 30 aces kind of guy, he'll be an ace. You know what I mean? Like
Gallon type.
Yeah. So they all and they do interesting things with with pitches. I think I was just talking to somebody. I think the Twins don't get enough credit among the pantheon of great pitching development outfits. We do try to give them credit here, but Josh Kalk is one of the greats of our time in terms of pitching development, one of the smartest guys, and they've done great things with biomechanics. They were early Kinatrax adopters. They've really done really interesting things there, and I don't think people give them enough credit. And so I'm glad to see that we got. I'm really surprised that the one guy who didn't put the Twins in the top 10 used to pitch for them, but that's all right.
I think starting pitching. I'm very aware of how they do their starting pitching.
Yeah.
I think it also speaks to the lack of separation from about pick 6 on a list like this down to 16 to 18. That you can kind of say the beauty's in the eye of the beholder. Like how optimistic do you want to be on the projections? Do you want to see the best versions of Pablo Lopez showing up? If you do that, then they have an ace. I think you can look at the depth and kind of 1 through 3. They do look close to the top end rotations. They're just a half notch on the dial worse at each spot, where if you match them up against the teams ahead of them in a playoff series, you'd say, they're slight underdog, even though they wouldn't be overmatched. You'd say they could be fine.
But they'd win 1 or 2 of those games. You know what I mean? Like slight underdogs win games, so they wouldn't be overmatched, and you wouldn't be like, oh, they went over 3,
Yeah. So I think it's a good rotation.
It was the Yankees.
Right.
I mean, that's been the past. With the 2 teams that I had that just barely didn't make the list, there was actually a pretty clear marker, and I know this was a subjective exercise the way I did it with the letter grades, but the Tigers and Reds fell off for me, and the reason they did was they had nothing on their list that was higher than a B. The closest was the Reds. Stuff grade was like a B+, but they also had a C+ health rating. So when I average out the Tigers and Reds, I get more like a B-, and the Twins for me were B+, where I give him B for stuff grade. I give him, especially since some of their stuff, seems to stymie stuff grades, so they get a B for kind of smartness and stuff, B for top 3, and B plus for health. So, I think that's exactly what oatmeal is.
Yeah. The Twins being oatmeal, not a huge surprise. Trevor also had the Astros in his group. They fell just short on each of my list and Eno's list. I feel like that's the one that I'm least confident in leaving out at the moment, just because Framber Valdez, one of the more underrated starters in baseball. Hunter Brown pitched like an ace from May on last year. Spencer Arrighetti was interesting in the second half. Ronaldo
throwing
Blanco,
a sinker now, and that could be the exact same thing that Hunter Brown did, because they were beating up Arrighetti's four seam, even though it was good by stuff models.
Yeah,
if he becomes the new Hunter Brown, watch out.
Ronaldo Blanco was a great story last year and pitched a little better than people realize, even beyond the no-hitter. Hayden Wesneski has really interesting stuff. You're putting that guy in the 5 spot while you wait for Luis Garcia, Lance McCullers, and Christian Javier
says he wants to come back in the second half.
Yeah. So your 6, 7, and 8 are all hurt right now. So if you have injuries or significant injuries in the first half of the season, that's going to be the problem. But that top 5, that's a good top 5.
Yeah, that's where they landed. I mean, at this point, betting against those guys until they don't make the playoffs is something that's going to be really hard to do. So it's just like Framber is the same every day. Hunter was really, really good last year. After he learned the sinker, Arrighetti's doing it, and then Blanco was not just pretty good; he was really good the whole year. Like he was exceptionally good. So I was like, this guy's way better than I thought he would be, especially this late. Like he's older. Doing it right now is crazy, and he's got a really good arsenal that he I mean, it's just the Astros thing. He's just like the next guy's up. He stepped in and now he's one of their dudes. So they're just consistent again. And I'm just like, I'm not ready to count them out yet out of the top 10.
So here's a random kind of would you rather question, because I think the projections sort of agree on regressing both of these guys. But who do you trust more to come close to repeating what they did in 2024 within reason? Who do you think is just better in 2025? Ronel Blanco or Ronaldo Lopez?
Oh, I knew you were going there. I'm going Lopez.
You're going Lopez. Okay. Any particular reason?
Ronaldo Blanco is a change-up first guy, and so I don't know that I trust the results on his slider and the command on his slider. And he was also kind of predictable. He went to the slider a lot in 2-0 counts and stuff, and I think that there's a hitter adjustment that could be made to the way he pitched last year.
Okay, I think that's reasonable. I mean, 2 more ticks on the fastball for Lopez is probably one of the things I'm looking at and saying, if they're both going to be a little more hittable this year, the magnitude of being hittable is going to be worse when you're averaging 93.6 on the fastball the way Blanco did a year ago.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I would say if your better pitches, you're like with Lopez with the slider versus Blanco with the changeup.
Right?
I would lean on the slider a little bit more because it's more.
Glad to hear you say that.
I know
your
it's
best
coming.
pitch
You
was
can't hit it as well. Pitch.
Your best pitch was a changeup, right?
Yeah, I mean,
I didn't want to. I know it's like that's a bias of mine. It's like I'm going to take the guy with the breaking ball, but I didn't want to.
Well, when the breaking ball is by far their best off-speed offering, and Blanco's changeup is by far his best. Like it's a lot better than slider. Slider's just a show me type of thing.
Like a command pitch.
And I would say mine were closer, or at least I thought of my slider as an option, especially when it turned into a sweeper. Then I was like, this is a swing and miss. I can do this. But before, you're right. I was changeup for that.
The other thing that Trevor said that was really great there was, seems like maybe a small thing, but he's saying like, I'm not ready to bet against him. Like, I just literally was talking to an executive, and I was like, it seems like we were talking about the Astros R&D and the whole brain drain that's happening in Houston and the whole new direction, and do they have enough sort of institutional inertia when it comes to the smart things they were doing, or is it running out? And he was like, every time I go down this road that you're going down right now, like early last year, when they signed Jose Abreu, every time I've thought, okay, this is where it ends, I've been wrong. So,
yep, they've made us look silly on this show at least a couple of times already. Just saying, the dynasty's over. Especially first half of last year, around May, it kind of felt like things were falling apart quickly. Not so fast. So a tough organization to bet against, even as things continue to change in Houston. Do you have any teams you left off, and maybe they weren't even like the next 5 in, that you kind of worry like, I could be wrong about this group? Because I caught one along the way. I was looking at the Giants and I thought, there's a world in which this Giants rotation is a top 10 rotation this year. You go Webb, Verlander, Ray, in whatever order at the top. Probably Webb, Ray, Verlander, doesn't matter. But those 3 are a good first 3. Hicks is still interesting. We've talked about him a lot on the show. I think we talked about Harrison and Birdsong a couple of weeks ago. Landon Root might be the 5 to start the year. Keaton Wynn's healthy right now. Like, they might have 8
they have
quality options.
They have really great depth. Because Carson Wisenhunt, you didn't even say him yet. So.
And Carson Wisenhunt's another guy waiting in the wings that could be used for some starts at some point this year too.
I think they're lacking a little bit in aceness.
A little.
Like, is Birdsong ever going to be like an ace? Is it going to click? It could. Of course it could. Keaton Wynn's fastball is not amazing. It's not an ace's fastball. He's going to be a guy who's good, but I don't know if, he could be Joe Ryan at some point.
Could they oatmeal their way to be the Twins? Could they be the 8th best rotation in baseball because of the way they're built? Like, I think that's a possibility that has sort of sprung up going through this exercise for me.
I think looking at Trevor's analysis of the Rays, I was like, that's the one I was kicking myself. That's the one I think I'll be wrong on. I think the Rays should be a top 10 team. I don't know who to kick out, to put them in.
Issue. That's the issue. I have the Cubs in mind, but that's just because Imanaga has all the experience, and there's no reason to think that he won't be good again this year. And then I love Justin Steele. I think he's wildly underrated and not talked about enough. And Jameson Taillon was rock solid last year. Rock solid. Did a great job. So I'm like, and he's experienced. So I'm like, that's a good top 3. And then they have a bunch of different moving pieces with Assad and all these other guys who have experience and can pitch the last couple spots. And I'm like, maybe they sneak in just because I feel like there's more options there than the Braves, but I'm like, but I agree wholeheartedly on the Giants, because even from the playoff 3, the top 3 context, I'm like, Logan Webb is going to go out and, aggressiveness in playoffs. Sometimes some guys, just sinker guys, just get ground ball, and it's going super fast, and you can't either get in the groove, you can't get anything going, but you see it. And then you got Justin Verlander. If he's like found something new, adds something that goes in, like some sort of changeup or a sinker or something, and he starts to do that again, wouldn't put it past him. He's appeared again a couple times in his career. He could do it again. And
he's
then
mostly
Robbie
talking
Ray,
about getting back to his 20. I think he's going back to his 2019 mechanics. And he said he had a neck problem last year that didn't let him kind of be as fluid as he wanted. So maybe it's just a mechanical thing that can be there for him too.
But like, who could ever count out just for? It's the same thing with Scherzer. I'm like, I just can't bet against him, because that'll just, I'll be wrong. I know I will. And then Robbie Ray, I know he hasn't thrown a lot, but he's won a Cy Young. Like, his ceiling, like these guys' ceiling, if they're all at their ceilings at the right time, you're like, they might be the best. Like, I'll take these guys against anybody if they're all cooking. But the chance of that happening with Robbie Ray being, in his mid 30s and Verlander being over 40, like the chances of that happening are low. But if they do, now they're serious. But you just can't count it. The question marks are too big, so you just throw them.
They can cover themselves pretty well though if those guys get hurt.
Yeah.
I'll also call back to Atlanta. I had them second on my list because Strider is probably going to return end of April, early May. If you're only going to take Strider out for 1 month of the season and you go Sale, Strider, Schwellenbach, Lopez, Holmes, I think that's a phenomenal top 3. It is as good almost as any top 5 you're going to find other than the Dodgers and maybe other than the Mariners. And then the next 3 up for this team, AJ Smith-Shawver, Bryce Elder, Ian Anderson, they're not bad as 6 through 8 starters, right? They have their flaws, but I think this is still like low key, a really high ceiling Atlanta group.
They could be bad.
Yeah. I've seen bad out of those 3 guys.
Yeah.
You can get worse.
When it was bad, they were bad. They were reaching. They're searching.
Well, Yankees
Elder
6 through 8 is worse.
In spring either.
Oh,
So,
Yankees 6 through 8 is worse.
It is worse.
Well, of the 6 through 8 for the Yankees, I'm like, the only name I know is Carlos Carrasco. So
Right.
I'll throw Drew
He's like
Hackenberg.
a complete unknown.
yeah.
Drew Hackenberg is a sleeper. I kind of stumbled into doing some other research for one of the sicko dynasty leagues I play in, and I think he's another depth guy that could end up getting some innings for Atlanta this year. And people are going to say, who the hell is Drew Hackenberg? And he's actually going to be useful for them. But any other thoughts on these rankings before we move on?
They're sure to be wrong.
They're sure to be wrong. Disagree accordingly, or just make your own cases. Make your own top 10 first before you pick ours apart. I think that's the only rule for the criticism, right? Like, do the exercise yourself and then come at us and tell us what you like or what you don't like about our processes here. Do that in the Discord. We'll have a little chat in there later on today. All right. One more thing I wanted to get to today. Unique processes, things that are happening in spring that you're hearing about, that you've seen, that teams are trying to utilize, new tools, new tricks, new anything. What have you seen? What have you heard, that has kind of caught your attention?
Well, I was talking to one pitching coach, and two things came up. One was just a really aggressive pairing of which side of the rubber they were on with certain biomechanical like issues or command issues, but mostly thinking about it in different ways with using traject to like make the case to the pitcher. So this one pitching coach was like, hey, I used the traject and I moved you to the part of the rubber that I want to move you to. And I just want you to stand in against yourself and see your slider from this viewpoint as opposed to the viewpoint that you're at right now. So using traject for pitching development was one of them. And then that same pitching coach was talking about using music in bullpens to improve or to adjust the tempo of his pitchers. So, just the idea that some pitchers need to kind of get like I was just talking to Tobias Myers about this, like, move the tempo up, Tobias Myers said he used to do this thing where he pumped 3 times before he went into, when he did his full windup, he would pump 3 times or he pumped multiple times. And he said, all I was doing, I was pumping, was thinking about all the things that could go wrong.
That's a bad cue.
So he's like, he told Chris Hook that, and Chris Hook was like, okay, let's just take the pump out.
Let's not do that anymore.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Chris Hook is a phenomenal pitching coach. I have never been a pitching coach in my life, never pitched above Little League. I think I would have made the same suggestion in instance. Like, hey, maybe don't do that. Just see what happens when you don't. See if your brain's a little happier.
But the other pitching coach was talking, and I think about like, he was saying that he thinks that like DJ Shadow is like the perfect running music because that works for him. But I've been working on shortening my stride, and I've been trying to get to maybe like 170 strides per minute in my running. And so I think DJ Shadow's too few BPM. I get to more upbeat. Like I need, you can actually match your BPM to your strides per minute and start to, I need something that's like 165, 170 beats per minute. So now you're talking about definitely more upbeat music that you're looking for. And so he was talking about the same thing in bullpens where they blast music and they change the music depending on what they kind of want out of the tempo. Some guys need to slow down. Some guys are too aggressive, too fast. So I did want to ask Trevor about tempo, just specifically what that means to you, that word, and like, did you ever have to find your tempo? Was that was that a big part of becoming a major league pitcher?
Oh yeah, tempo is wildly important. I think that honestly, I'm kind of sad that I'm learning about this now, or not learning about it, or thinking about it, I guess, as an option. But it became wildly apparent when I had to do the work with the pitch clock that my tempo was not fast enough. And so I love that. I think that he's getting in a groove, or he's settling in. This is all tempo related. A lot of times it's like a subconscious cue that you feel like you're in a rhythm in the game. We literally call it in a rhythm. So you might as well listen to music is literally rhythm. So attaching those things together is important. And even if you think about how guys pick their walkout songs, they're matching it to their style of pitching. They really are. Like the way that they approach going out there is what they choose for their music. And that's why I always had like Coheed and Cambria out there, because I just wanted to be like, I got to get up, get myself going. Like energy. And so I love this. And by the way, if you need recommendations for BPMs to run to, Chase and Status, drum and bass, 170.
Nice.
They got you. And they got lots of great. New album's awesome, so I think you'll like it. So yeah, I think it's an awesome idea. A lot of guys listen to music. There's that story about Max Scherzer coming out in the flight suit and Kenny Loggins' Danger Zone and making people sign waivers to watch him throw bullpens.
I don't think I knew that story.
You don't know that story?
George Kirby loves dubstep. I know that. He puts like dubstep in his ears when he's.
Of course he does. But George probably throws like with headphones in, but like put it on a speaker. Get the big light up speaker from Radio Shack or whatever and blast it. Max actually did that in Minnesota. Yeah, and they had a velvet rope.
You had to sign the NDA.
It was just like a joke, they had a little clipboard and like sign it. So like David Price would go sign it and go watch him throw. And remember, the pitching coach used to do like the gun thing, or like he'd do all the things when he hit the spots, and they do it together. Like that was on the internet. Pitching Ninja would get all those things of them both doing it when he warmed up. But that was his whole thing there. So like people have been using music, but thinking about it this way to try to get yourself. I'm trying to sync up to this. I think is a brilliant way to do it because it's passive and you can just people naturally do that. I think people naturally can like pick up on a song. So that's a great idea.
Yeah. Why do you think tempo is so important? I think, some part of it is like you have to get your release point at the right time. But there's also sort of pitch to pitch rhythm that's a little bit different. Like there's tempo within your delivery as a mechanical aspect, right? But then there's also sort of like get the ball. You see people do different things. Get the ball. Either there's guys who get the ball, get right back on the rubber, bang, bang, bang. There's other guys who get the ball, walk around, 2 outs, get on the rubber, So there's different tempos between pitches and different tempos, when it comes to like actually bring the arm up, do the thing, do that thing, The other thing that I saw that Tobias Myers had this thing that was it looked like the body blade, which is like the kind of it's like a stick that you
this is hard to explain. I'm thinking about how I explain it. Like, I don't know.
It's a stick that's kind of wobbly, and you kind of like wobble it, and wobbling it makes stability. You use little small muscles. Stability. So he had something that looked like a body blade, but it had a big orange tennis ball on the end, and it was a little bit more whippy than it was. It was kind of like, it's kind of like almost like a lasso, but it was a stick. So basically what he wanted to do was whip that stick around so that the orange ball, like he looked like a hitter. It literally looked like a hitting drill. Like where he just gets into like a hitting stance and he like whips that thing, and it was for his blocking leg. And he said that, doing this really helped him block in a way where he falls towards the plate as opposed to blocking in a sort of circular manner where he's going to block and fall towards. Yeah, so like he with this drill, it kept him from going around the block where he falls off to first. This one like sort of let him block and energy goes towards the plate. So he was just carrying, like it was attached to him, dude. Like he was just like walking around the clubhouse with this thing. So he said that was a big thing from Chris Hook. So there's definitely all sorts of gadgets. I guess the core velocity belt was a big thing.
I use that like crazy. Yeah. They still use it a lot because it pulls you down. It's the same thing. It pulls you down the mountain. I think that what you're talking about with the reason that tennis ball there too is orange is because when it streaks through the air, you can see it. You can see the path of how it's coming out of your hand. So you can get like that feedback of this is how the ball would come out of my hand at the same time. So I can like see what the ball flight would be. It's like tricking your brain into feeling what your leg's doing the right way with what you see when you're throwing the ball without doing it, without having to do it. The core velocity belt, though, really helped me with the block. It's interesting about the block, too. I didn't block at the same time. Like, Verlander's got the perfect block. Everyone uses him as the example. He blocks, and then he releases the ball like a catapult, like perfectly
That's what's perfect about him. That makes sense.
Oh, because if you go look at his
Verlander,
force, it's like a perfect, all the, like,
he's like, his energy is all towards the plate. It's like all towards the plate.
His timing's perfect.
And he blocks really hard. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what he fixed when he fixed his hip thing in 2014. That's what he was having trouble doing. And then he figured it out. And then he became back and was the guy. I was a long stride guy. My block was literally like I extended my leg through throwing the ball. So I blocked after I released because my extension was so far.
Which is not what you're supposed to do.
It can be if you have extremely strong quads, but that's the problem. Not everyone does. I'm so quad dominant that was something that I could physically do, but no one else could do it. Everyone's like, I don't know how you do this. I'm like, well, you should.
I thought blocking
my
quads.
They don't move at all. It's kind of a problem, guys. So I
thought biomechanically the blocking leg was supposed to send, it sends energy back up your leg. And then
it's supposed to be a smooth transfer up the. It's supposed to be the smoothest version of a transfer in your body. But that's how I developed my mechanics. I didn't have the block, and so that everything else kind of changed slightly to make it smooth, even though the timing isn't exactly the same. But I could still generate force that way, and then my body compensated. So like my quads are ridiculous. To this day, I wake up every morning like, oh my goodness.
Those are big quads.
This is crazy how tight these are. I can't even. There's tests you can do that to tell you how tight your quads are, and mine are to the point where I'm like I can't even get to 180 degrees. I can't even straighten my leg.
I'm like that.
They naturally go up.
Like I can't put my legs on the ground straight and sit up straight.
Yeah,
like I can't really do that.
I immediately peak my knees because my quads are so tight. Like, but that's also what allowed me to do what I did when I pitched. So.
I talked about your theory of being like hypomobile and you're hypomobile and you always like spot the hypermobile guys. So I talked about that with Brian Wu, and I attributed to you and I asked him about that and he said that he had spent his coming up he'd spent all his time working on being flexible to the point where he is super flexible. And so now he has to go the other direction and do things like stand on those half yoga balls, with weights. Yeah, the Bosus. He has to stand on the Bosus with one leg. He has to do a lot of stability and core stuff where he's trying to tighten up. He's trying to firm up, because he was so he comes from a more flexible way,
Tyler Duffy had to do that, and Taylor Rogers had to do it, and they'd always like work out 2 to 3 times a week. And I'd be like, "Why are you guys working out?" They're like, "Dude, we have to. We're not just big tight monsters like you that don't lift weights and are the same strength." Like, and I was like, "Good point." And they're like, "And we get loosey goosey. Like, you want your rubber bands to be taut still. Like, you don't want them to get. The longer they get, the harder it is to create separation." It's so funny you mentioned Brian Wu too, because I saw a picture. You told me this yesterday. When we were getting ready for the show, and then I saw a picture of him talking. It was Randy Johnson was talking to him, Logan Gilbert, and Bryce Miller, and he's standing there.
They were at camp that same day,
and he's like in his flip flops. Brian Wu is, and is like he's standing with his knees locked, and his knees are inside of his kind of like Josh Beckett used to. Remember him with the?
Oh yeah.
His feet would go out farther. His knees were inside, so he kind of like a little bit duck-footed. I was like, oh yeah. That's what hypermobile guys have. That like their knees can go past 180 degrees, and he was literally doing it in the picture. I'm like, I look at this guy's knees, and I can see that he's flexible.
Oh, and what were you say? Tell the story really quickly before we got to go. Tell the story really quickly about the joke that someone played with the. Yeah, what was Presley doing? So Presley's hypomobile, I guess.
Hypomobile. And it became a joke because Presley was there with Rogers and Duffy as well. All very they were all different ways hypomobile. One thing that hypermobile guys have is sometimes their joints can go past. People used to think it's called being double jointed or whatever when you were kids.
Yeah.
In reality, like they straighten their arm out and their arm would go past 180 degrees. They go like past
because they're just so flexible.
A lot. They're so flexible. And Presley's is like almost gross. It goes so far, both of his arms. So he can just like do it really fast. It doesn't hurt him, but it looks gross. So he's lifting weights. We have I think he's the AA strength coordinator. First year with the organization with the Twins. And we're in the training room. There's a window into the weight room. And Press goes, watch this. I'm going to go get him. And he goes in there and he takes like 10 pound weights, just starts doing bicep curls, which nobody does. He's just like leaning over, he goes, and you just hear him go, ah, and like stretches his arm out and his like elbow goes way past the thing. And he's like, get help, screaming. The guy's freaking out. He's like hitting on things. He's like, we need somebody. And everyone's laughing and he doesn't get it. And Press broke his own arm to scare the crap out of this guy who was supposed to be watching
on the window. Get somebody in here.
Get some help. It literally looked like the scene in Independence Day where the scientist is stuck in
that's how I'm imagining it.
It was really funny. Everyone was laughing so hard because we all knew, but he didn't. So yeah, really mean, but also welcome to the crew. And then he was our buddy for that on. Yeah. We didn't know him very well, so they thought we'd get him.
Well, on that note, I think it's time for us to go. There's no way I can top that story. That's phenomenal. Join our Discord with the link in the show description. You can find us on Bluesky. I am Trevor May at bsky.social. Eno is Sarris.bsky.social. I am dvr.bsky.social. Give us a subscription if you haven't got one already. theathletic.com/rates and barrels gets you the best deal that we have. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Friday.
Thanks for listening.